Family, Dungeon family. Welcome to the Practical Purpose Podcast. It's your boy, Dr. Brian Williams. I'm here. Y'all let me know if you can hear me out there in YouTube land and Facebook land. Let me know. Let me know if you can hear me nice and clear. Here we go. We got a tough topic tonight. We're in a series called Dealing with Difficulty. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're talking about dealing with difficulty, but tonight we're specifically going to be talking about dealing with difficult people. And so what I need you to do now is like, share, subscribe, smash that like button. Share this out because I know there's at least 3 people right now that you think about that needs to learn something or needs a reassurance or needs some type of teaching about dealing with difficult people, whether or not they're dealing with difficult people at home or they're dealing with difficult people at work or wherever they may go. I know you know somebody who needs it. So text it to them, text them the link, share it on Facebook, send it to them on YouTube. I know it's a little blurry. It looks like it's a little blurry. We got some bad weather going on right now. So it may be a little blurry. But it should fix itself eventually. Listen, we got a good topic tonight, and we got some things that we got to discuss on the show tonight. Listen, go on and share it out so we can make sure everything is good. Everything is good. Listen, I got some shout outs I need to do tonight. Often we get into a place where we are not acknowledging people for doing great things, right? We're so competitive. We get to a place sometimes where we're extremely competitive, and because of that competitive nature that we may have, we don't always acknowledge people. All right. We don't always acknowledge people. Yes, it's real blurry. I don't know why it's real blurry. Let me try to fix something. But it is real blurry right now. Let me see what's going on here. Let me see where my tech folk at. Let me see if I can get something straight. Let's see. Y'all let me know if that did something. Did that change anything? No, yes, no. Holla at me. Let's see, y'all. Holla at me. Let me know. All right, here we go. It didn't change nothing. Okay. Well, hey, we just gonna have to rock and roll right now. We're gonna rock and roll. And I think it's due to the weather. We got some really bad weather going on right now. So we're going to still try to make this work. We're going to still try to make it happen tonight. All right. There's some people I got the shout out. All right. I got to give some shout outs to some of my brothers. Listen, I want to highlight them. You see them hopefully on the screen. These are brothers that I have in education. That are doing some amazing things, man. They're doing some amazing things in education. And I'm so proud to call them brothers and friends on many occasions, and we've worked closely together. And the vision that he has is good. It looked like my sound going in and out too. Can y'all hear me? I don't know what's going on with the stream. Okay, all right, we're gonna make it work, y'all. It's the weather. So you got Michael Dease on the top of the screen. There. Then in right up under here is my brother, my friend, Dr. Brandon Ross. He's the newly appointed principal at Muller Road Middle School. Middle top is one of my mentors, friends, Mr. Chad Myers. He's a principal at Southeast Middle School. Y'all, she said, "Not today, Satan." Listen. He tried because he knows something about to happen. Under him, my frat brother, my line brother, Maurice Thomas. He's principal up in Rock Hill, Lancaster area. At the top is Dr. Turner. Dr. Turner, amazing young man. He's taking over at Harbison West Elementary, and then under him is one of my closest friends, Reynard Jefferson, who's taking over at Watkins-Nance Elementary in Rock Hill, or I'm sorry, in Columbia, South Carolina. And see, it's so important, I think, that we highlight people who are doing great things, even people. A lot of times we look at it as something competitive. All right, y'all, it's frustrating me why this stream is blurry. It's not blurry on my end, but when I look at it, I can tell something isn't right. And I don't know how to fix that in the moment. So we're just gonna keep rocking and rolling with it. All right, just listen up and see what we can make happen. So yeah, it's important. I think it's important. So often we get caught up in competitiveness, like being competitive with people, instead of acknowledging greatness, right? And I think that's so key. I think that's so important that we acknowledge greatness. PK and 10 says we need more black men in the education sector. I think it's true that we do. I think it's important. But I think oftentimes we get, as black men, boxed into a specific role, into a specific way things have to be done. And so oftentimes we have to go without, or we have to go other places to find ourselves, right? And to bounce back. And so I wanted to highlight these guys, because these are guys I personally know. I see the work that they do. These are guys who have mentored me, and these are some guys that I've mentored, right? But I think it's important and it's key that we recognize how those things actually work. Yeah, I'm frustrated with this stream. I ain't gonna sit here and lie in the dungeon. I don't get it. I don't know. I'm gonna try one other thing and kind of see. But I don't know. This doesn't normally happen. But like I say, we do have bad weather going on. All right, we do have some bad weather going on right now. So we're gonna see. Don't let it frustrate you. All right, y'all, hold on. Let's go to a break right quick. Let me see if I can figure it out. Give me 1 second. Give me one. All right, let's see if that worked. Let's see if that worked. Let's see if that work. Where my tech people at? That ain't work. That ain't work. So I don't know, y'all. I don't know what we gonna do. So we just gonna keep rolling with it, man. We're gonna keep rolling with it. It does clear up, y'all let me know. If it does clear up, y'all let me know. So I did my shout outs, man. Listen, we're gonna get into our topic. We have a question of the day tonight, and it's not necessarily a deep question. It's actually a little fun question that I'm interested to hear that somebody sent in. I'm interested to hear what you all may say in the chats. And we're going to get to that question now, a few seconds. But before we get to that question, I want to make sure that I highlight my brother who blessed me with an intro. We used to use dial-up. PK said we used to use dial-up. We know how to deal. Yeah, it's got to be other, man. Like the weather is terrible right now, so maybe I should have postponed the live or whatever. I don't know, but we're gonna keep rocking and rolling anyway. So my brother blessed me with an intro. So we're gonna drop the intro and then we're gonna come right back into our question of the day, and we're gonna jump into the lesson for the night. Let's go. 45 seconds.
1, 2. Yeah. 1, 2. We living life with a practical purpose, making every day worth it. Live from the dungeon, we go deeper than the surface, leading with wisdom from the street to the churches. Searching, what seeking you find? We speaking right to your mind. The sun ain't fighting to shine, no diamonds either. Light hit the Jews and turn fools to believers. Steady making moves and teaching truth to the leaders. Use all these tools just so you can supersede us. It's L. Yeah. Say 1, 2. Yeah. Say 1, 2. Yeah. Yeah. For real.
Here we go. Question of the day. Question of the day. What are the top 5 comedy sitcoms of all time? Put it in the chat. Top 5 comedy sitcoms of all time. Man, y'all, I'm frustrated with this, man. I don't know what this could be. Top 5 comedy sitcoms of all time. Put your answers in the chat. Top 5 comedy sitcoms of all time. What we got? Let me get to the chat. What we got? Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you. Top 5. All right, I'm gonna give y'all mine. Now, what's on the screen is not my top 5. All right, I just wanted to make sure I threw some stuff up there. All right, I'll make sure I threw some stuff up there. Roseanne, Cosby, PK and 10 says Different World, Living Single, Everybody Loves Raymond. Right. Okay. I can dig it. I don't agree with that, but I can dig it. I can dig it. Sam, Andy Griffith, King of Queens, Martin. Oh man, this dude stole most of my list. Yeah, I can dig that too. You know what I'm saying? I'm not against that. I think when you start looking at it though, all right, anytime you do these lists, right? You do these top 5 lists or whatever the case may be. It's about one preference, right? It's about what you like, but it's also about perspective, right? So sometimes we grew up watching certain shows, and because we grew up watching those shows, we ended up really liking those shows. But then also we grew up doing some things that we really don't like, right? Sam says, I know your number 1 is Sanford and Son. Yeah, it might be. I don't know. You about to find out. So, all right, here's my top 5, y'all. I'm gonna start with number 5. My top 5 greatest comedy sitcom of all time. Here it is. Number 5 is The Office. The Office is hilarious, man. It's a different type of comedy, right? It's not the same type of comedy we may be accustomed and used to, but it's a different type of comedy, and it is relevant. I guess it's completely relevant. Now, I will say, um, if you look at Abbott Elementary, I think it's gonna creep up there. I think Abbott Elementary is one of those shows that we have now that I think it'll creep up there. I think it's gonna end up creeping up in some people's list. All right, here we go. Number 5 is The Office for me. Number four, Martin. Martin, man, I could watch Martin all day. Not every day, but I could watch it all day. Just the way he put that show together is amazing. And it's like the fact that everybody on the show is funny. Like, you have some shows where you have 2 or 3 of the people. Everybody on Martin is hilarious in their own way. Right. All right, number three. Y'all ready for number 3? The Cosby Show. Cosby Show could creep up a little bit too, because the Cosby Show is it's different. Like, it was the first show that actually put black people in a place where we were looking successful, right? You got a doctor, you got a lawyer, you got you know what I'm saying, so many good things going on, all the kids in college. That was unheard of then. So the Cosby Show is definitely up there at number 3 for me. All right, here we go. Controversial one, number 2. Hey, here it is. Andy Griffith Show. I know my wife don't like that. I know my wife don't like that. But Andy Griffith Show is number 2. Like, if you're a leader, and you can watch how Andy solves problems, it's ridiculous. Like his leadership ability, his skill, and then everyone on that show is funny too, like in their own way. And it's a setup for that show. You know what I mean? Like, so you've got so many different ways that they have comedy there. You've got a lifestyle that's totally different than the lifestyle we live today, right? It's so peaceful back there in Mayberry, North Carolina. But that show is number 2 for me. And number 1, you already know what number 1 is. Funniest comedy of all time is Sanford and Son, man. Sanford and Son. Red Fox is one of my top stand-up comedians of all time. But not only do I think that show was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, comedy sitcom in my opinion. He's just amazing, man. I'm gonna use one of his clips today, but he's just amazing. I don't know what Pecan is trying to say here. Somebody said, but I really think that Sanford and Son, Chad Myers, my man. I got Martin over Andy. I can dig that. I'm good. Andy is one of those preference or perspective shows for me. Like, we grew up, ain't had no cable. Andy came on every Sunday. Andy came on right after the news at 7:00 every night. So I watched it. But I can take Martin over Andy. Long as Martin is in that top 5, I'm good with you. Now, I know some people that don't even put Martin in their top 5, and that's a problem. That's a problem. Appreciate you being here, man. Andy up there too. Right. Got to be, man. Got to be. If you sit there and watch how the Andy Griffith Show breaks down things, there's no way you can't put that in your top 5, man. It's hilarious. All right, man. So we're gonna jump into it again. Like, it's got to be the storm while the stream is a little blurry, but as long as you hear, you good. You can hear, you good. Listen, we're going to talk about dealing with difficult people tonight, and it's a difficult topic. It's a topic that is very relevant, though. So I don't want you to allow the blurriness of the stream due to the situation to not help you to hear what's about to be said. And so as we talk about dealing with difficult people, we're in a series called Dealing with Difficulty. So we're going to talk about dealing with difficult people, dealing with difficult circumstances, and dealing with difficult news. right? And so we're going to be just kind of unpacking this tonight, or through this series, and understand that when you come to the dungeon, when you come to the Practical Purpose podcast, everything is not said for you to agree with. It's said to challenge you. It's said to put you in a position where you have to self-reflect, and you got to look at yourself first in order to analyze whether or not what you're doing is the best practice and the best way to attack whatever the topic is that we're dealing with. All right. And we look at those life principles from a biblical perspective. All right. So tonight we're talking about dealing with difficult people. Check this out.
You were a deadbeat the day my sister married you, and you still a deadbeat today.
Listen, Esther, now you know good and well the day I married your sister, I was loaded.
Yeah, you was loaded all right. You were so drunk you fell on the preacher.
But I had to get drunk to look at your ugly family.
Don't you talk about my family.
I'll talk about your family. Listen, for years, people going around saying, black is beautiful. They took one look at your family and said, hold everything.
Well, that's something you wouldn't understand. We have inner beauty.
Yeah, what?
Inner beauty.
Well, you better put your liver where your face is.
You are crude and evil, and most of all, you stupid.
How'd you like one across your lips?
Come on, try.
Come on, now.
Come on, Stumpy.
Stumpy, I'm tall enough to give you 3 of these in your nose. Come on.
Oh, no, you won't.
Yes, I will.
Oh, no, you won't.
Would you two stop it?
Tell us.
I'm surprised at you. You mean to tell me you'd hit a lady?
No, I wouldn't hit a lady, but I'd hit her.
All right, Fred. But I feel sorry for Lamont. You've raised him to be a backslider just like yourself.
Who you calling a backslider, witch?
I'm calling you a backslider because you do not believe.
I believe I'm gonna knock you out of here. I believe.
And what's more, you are evil-minded, selfish old man.
Listen, Hap, if you ain't out of here by the time I count to 3, I put a lump on your head, look like a wig on top of a natural on top of a wig.
And if you lay one hand on me, I'll unscrew your arm from your shoulder and beat your brains out. You are a heathen. That's what you are, a heathen. No good heathen. And you're gonna pay for your sins one of these days, you miserable old bug.
All right, so we talking about dealing with difficult people. That was a good scene for dealing with difficult people. So let's find difficult people. Let's define who difficult people are. And you may not agree with these definitions that I give for difficult people, but you can formulate your own definition. Difficult people are people who lack empathy and concern for others. Let me say it again. Difficult people are people who lack empathy and concern for others. Listen, all of us at some point in some situations fit that category. All of us at some point in some situations fit the category of being a difficult person. See, when you heard the topic dealing with difficult people, you immediately started to think about people in your life. You immediately started to think about the fact that there are people you work with, people you live with who are difficult, but you discounted the fact that in many cases and at many times, you are the difficult person that you need to deal with. Let me say that again. Sometimes you are the difficult person that you need to deal with. There are times in our lives, in situations, that we lack empathy and concern for others, for whatever reason that may be, in whatever situation that may be in. Sometimes we have to deal with ourselves because we are the difficult person. All right. So one definition for difficult people is people who lack empathy and concern for others. But here it is. Another definition is people who cause strife and unnecessary stress. People who cause strife and unnecessary stress can be categorized as difficult people. People who cause strife and unnecessary stress. Listen, I read this quote. It said, "You can't control others. You can only control your response to them." You can't control others, but you can only control your response to them. And so often when we talk about dealing with difficult people, whether or not it's at home or at the workplace, we are oftentimes spending our energy trying to control someone else. We are oftentimes spending our energy trying to control someone else. And I'm going to get down to that in a minute, but you can't control the uncontrollable, right? And so oftentimes we are exhausting our mental capacity because we're dealing with difficult people in a way that is causing us to drain ourselves because we're trying to control people when our objective and our job is never to control someone else. Listen, Christopher Brown says, my boy preaching. People who cause strife, man, I can hear him saying that right now. That's what's so funny. Yeah, people who cause unnecessary strife. And again, oftentimes that's us, right? Because sometimes somebody gets on your nerves, and what you do is you to get them back, you cause some unnecessary pain or strife for them just to pay them back. Right. People who cause unnecessary strife and stress. Is it you? That's the first question. Is it you? Are you the difficult person that you need to work on in your life? Yeah, because again, when you saw the title, when you saw dealing with difficult people, you automatically thought of 2 or 3 people, and none of those people were you. Are you willing to look in that proverbial mirror and say to yourself, I'm being difficult to someone else. I need to deal with me. I need to deal with me. Some people are in our lives. Some difficult people are in our lives because we put them there. Some difficult people are in our lives because we put them in our lives. And then some people are in our lives that are difficult because that's somewhat involuntary, right? We didn't pick them. Right? Some of y'all have difficult parents. You didn't pick them. Nothing you can do about it. Right? But there are some friends who keep stuff going that you keep close to you because you enjoy the pettiness of having difficult people around you. I'm going to step on some toes. Difficult people will reveal your character and your purpose. Let me say that again. Difficult people in your life, they're placed in your life to reveal oftentimes your character and your purpose. Think about the story of Joseph, right? His brothers threw him into slavery, tried to kill him, did all these negative things to him as difficult people. And what they actually did was expose his vision and his purpose. So oftentimes, if you look at difficult people as people who are placed in my life to help me understand my character and my purpose, then you don't necessarily see them as difficult or as opposition. You see them as an opportunity, right? You see them as an opportunity. Listen, difficult people are often us. And oftentimes, difficult people are the greatest teachers that could ever come into our lives. Listen, I've dealt with difficult people as well as you have, but I've dealt with difficult people a lot in places that I've worked, right? And because of that, I've been exposed, right? My character, my way of dealing with certain situations has been exposed. Even if it's not to everyone else, it was to myself. And I had to understand that there is power in looking at opposite opportunity. Let me say that again. There is power in looking at opposition as an opportunity. And sometimes you've got to get to a place that when opposition comes in the form of people or situations, like we're going to talk about later in this series, you see it as an opportunity. It's not the easiest thing to do. Sometimes I give the analogy of being on the beach and the waves start coming, and they get higher and higher, and you start to run away from them, but you see people with surfboards running towards what you ran away from. To you, it was opposition. To you, it was danger. To them, it's an opportunity. So when you begin to see life as chess and not checkers, you understand that oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes difficult people are placed strategically in our lives to help us learn who we are and how we need to grow ourselves. All right. All right. Difficult people can be the greatest teachers. Your response to difficult people will reveal your character. Your response to difficult people will reveal your character. Chris Breezy says, dealing with difficult people also makes you a better leader. It does. It does. That's so powerful. Like, because when you think about people like David, who was out there shepherding sheep as preparation to be a king, what you understand is that sheep don't rebel like people do. So when you go to different levels of leadership, he was leading sheep and then had to lead people. There's a different set of skills that you need when you move up in leadership, right? There's a different set of skills that you need. What he needed to shepherd sheep, he also needed to shepherd people, but he needed more than he needed to shepherd the sheep when he was shepherding the people. And you've got to understand that difficult people will help grow your leadership capacity. Difficult people, your response to them. All right. And so you have to know how to respond intelligently to unintelligent treatment. Did y'all hear what I just said? You got to know how to respond intelligently to unintelligent treatment. And so oftentimes people who are trying to be vindictive in your life, at your job, in your home, are looking for your response. That word is responsibility. Your ability and capacity to respond will determine your ability and your capacity to lead or to grow. Right? It's not just leadership. I tailor a lot that I say to leadership because of the moment of clarity, and people watch this for leadership. But what we have to understand as people is that your growth is often dependent upon your ability to respond to situations, respond to people, and respond to circumstances. Right? And so the way that you deal and handle people is powerful. My brother, he said, flip the script. We're going to get to flipping the script. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Oh, hold on. Man, this is my guy, man. This is my guy. Man, appreciate you being here, man, in the Facebook dungeon. All right. So you have to respond intelligently to unintelligent treatment. Respond intelligently to unintelligent treatment. There are 3 levels of difficult people. 3 levels of difficult people. 1, people who are difficult because they're different. Yeah, we categorize some people as being difficult because their upbringing, their moral compass, maybe their religious belief, maybe their way of seeing life is different than ours. And so because of their viewpoint, they make our life difficult, right? And so we may categorize them as difficult people, but guess what? Those people also categorize you as a difficult person, right? Those are people who are difficult because they are different, right? They're different than you. And oftentimes we struggle with diversity. We struggle with being around diverse people. We struggle. One of the hardest times that I struggled was my first, second year in college. Why? Because I grew up around 99.9% black people in church, 99.9% black people at school. And then I went to college and I found myself in situations where I was the only black male in the room of 20 and 30 and 40, 50 people. And when those things happen, it exposed the fact that I thought that people were difficult or people were not what I thought they should be, all because they were different than me. Right. And so we have to take our perspective and our viewpoint of people, and we have to base it on their human nature. Right. And everybody's character, everybody's moral compass, everybody's I was about to say melatonin, melanin in their skin is different. And so you have to get to a place where you embrace that diversity. First level of difficult people who are difficult because they're different. Listen, the second level of difficult people are people who are difficult because they are incompetent. People who are difficult because of incompetence. Listen, one thing in education that I think is so powerful and key is that I don't believe anybody gets into the education field to hurt children. I don't believe that. Teachers, whatever. I don't believe you get into educate. I believe everybody on a basis or at the very base of who they are, they love educating children. They want to help children in some capacity. Nobody does it to hurt children, right? But oftentimes in education, we have people, oftentimes in your business, in whatever capacity you work at, there are people who are doing things and in roles, but they are not competent. No matter how they got to that role, they are not competent. And because they are incompetent and you possibly are, they are difficult to you. But that can also be flipped. Now because here we got to examine ourselves first, right? Oftentimes we are incompetent and we are difficult to other people because they are competent. And our incompetency must always be accompanied by humility. Our incompetency must be accompanied by humility. When you're incompetent, but you're prideful, that's a problem. When you're incompetent, but you're willing to learn, that's different. And so some people are difficult in our lives, at our jobs, in our work, in our homes, in our churches, wherever we serve, because they are incompetent, and that frustrates us. That frustrates us, right? You got people who are different. You got people who are incompetent. And here it is, number 3, about 3 levels of difficult people. You people who are difficult because they are just evil. It ain't no way to put that. There are people who are being used to bring about terror and drama in other people's lives for no other reason than they're being used by Satan to do it. PK Tan says, and those difficult people in situations will expose your incompetence. Right. Yeah, we got to always examine ourselves first. Right. There are people who are genuinely evil, and they are being used to expose and to just wreak havoc on situations, organizations, people, places, right? And you got to understand that, like this show is practical, but we also look at things from a biblical perspective. And if you're looking at it from a biblical perspective, everything that happens naturally happens spiritually first. All right, so if you understand that, the scripture says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, rulers of darkness and high places. So what does that mean? That means that everything that happens in the physical is being orchestrated by something that's not physical. And so it is important to understand that some people that are operating in your life are genuinely causing havoc in your life, in your organization, in your workplace, because they're being used by something ungodly. All right. 3 levels of difficult people. I know I got it in high gear, but 3 levels of difficult people. People who are different than you. People who are incompetent. Now, let me back up to the incompetence again, because there has to be a metric that you measure what competence is. And I have a friend that I work with, and one thing that was said to me was, just because they don't do it your way doesn't mean they're incompetent. So your metric for measuring what's competent and what's incompetent has to be accurate, right? Just because you may not solve an issue or solve a problem the way that I do it doesn't mean you're incompetent. But if the metric and if the rubric says at the end of the day the problem is solved and you didn't get there, then that's incompetence. Are y'all tracking with me? And the third level is people who are genuinely being used. They're evil. They're being used by something spiritual to cause havoc. All right, when you're dealing with difficult people, there's some things you got to remember. You got to remember this self-examination. You got to look in the mirror first. If you don't get anything from this, you've got to understand that the same people that you are calling difficult, you in some situations and circumstances may be difficult yourself. You got to understand self-examination. You got to examine yourself. All right. Oftentimes we put that in the lens of something being spiritual all the time, but there are many times in which we've got to take intentional time to self-reflect on our own practices. Right. It starts with you, man. And that's the thing when let me shift to leadership a little bit. That's the thing when you get overly emotional and attached to how other people see you and how difficult people do things. Oftentimes you're unwilling to say, I played a role in the difficulty of this situation. You're unwilling to do that when you get too emotionally attached to certain people, certain things, and certain situations. So it starts with you. I think Reynard is right about that, my brother. It starts with you. That's why in leadership you have to be careful that you practice patience with people, because at the end of the day, you can't be a leader's decisions from emotion and not from the metric that's being used to evaluate competency. And that's so key in education, especially. What we often do is we try to look out for people. We put people in positions that's dealing with children based off of our relationship with them and not based off of their level of competency. And we work in a profession where you can't do that because it's life or death. One of my mentors who's on, Mr. Chad Myers, he said, who you put in front of kids is a life or death situation. Got to be careful. You got to practice self-examination. Listen, when things to remember, you've got to control the controllables. I think that's Inky Johnson that says that. You control what you can control. You control the controllables. Right? There's so often we find ourselves attempting to control people, attempting to control circumstances, attempting to control things that are completely and totally outside of our realm of control. You can't try to control what you can't control. If you're going to deal with difficult people, you got to remember that. All right, you got to remember to keep perspective. Perspective on human nature, perspective on story. Listen, every difficult person that you deal with has a story. There's something about them you don't know. I struggle with this because I'm more of a black and white type of guy. I'm more just cut and dry. Like, okay, this is what should have happened. This is what happened. It didn't happen. You wrong. Let's move on. Right. But you've got to understand when you're dealing with difficult people that you got to keep a perspective on human nature, and that everybody will have a low point. Right. And you got to be careful not to judge someone by their lowest point, because if the camera was rolling in your lowest point, is that what you would want to be judged by? You can't assassinate a person's character based off their worst mistake. Let me say that again. Don't assassinate a person's character based off of their worst mistake at their lowest moment. You got to be careful because you reap what you sow. All right, we're going to get to that. When you lose patience with people, you lose your connection with humanity. When you lose patience with people, you lose connection with humanity. You got to understand everybody has some built up baggage and trauma that they're bringing to the table. Everybody has some issues that they're dealing with that you don't know about. And what most people want is they just want to be heard and they want to be seen. Listen, so when you're dealing with difficult people, you have to keep a perspective and an understanding that they're human. They're human. Now we said point number 3 when we talked about dealing with difficult was that level 3 was that there are some people who are genuinely evil. Now they're being operated by something not human, but they themselves are still human. They have these proclivities and these trauma, this trauma that has accompanied how they make decisions, right? Sam Pollock, cuz says have respect for others, right? Right. It sometimes it boils down to just being that simple. You just gotta have respect for people, even when you disagree with them, right? Things to remember: stay calm, and Christians don't like this term here, but stay balanced. Balance, because when you start talking about balance, you start talking about Buddhism and Buddha and those some of those Eastern religions. But you have to stay calm and you have to stay balanced. And what balance means for me is understanding in the grand scheme of everything, is this worth it? One thing that I try to get across to the people I supervise is what is going to cause the most amount of peace at the end of the day. What's going to cause me to sleep better at the end of the day, right? And whatever that is, that's going to cause the most amount of peace to be inserted into this situation is what I'm going to do. All right. What's going to cause the most amount of peace? And so you've got to keep everything in the perspective. Oftentimes, when you're talking about real life situations of eternity, right? That's one thing. That's why Paul could say things like, I'm not worried about being beat and being stoned and being all of these things, because in the grand scheme of eternity, this is so minor, right? But when you're dealing with difficult people in the grand scheme of your vision and what you're trying to accomplish, is it worth it? Is it worth it? You got to stay balanced. Balance, PK10 says, balance in our word too. But we're going to stay on track. Balance, the winning walk. Oh, my sister, Lord have mercy. I'm honored. You are, if you want a Christian YouTube channel, go to the winning walk with Christina. It's very short videos as she's walking that just talks about God and different things you can apply in your life. She says some of the hardest people for me to deal with have taught me the most. Right. Difficult people are oftentimes our greatest teachers. Right? Our greatest teachers. Listen, difficult people are up to our interpretation. You define who's difficult. Oftentimes people who come to me that I may supervise, people who someone else may think is difficult is not difficult to me. Or vice versa. Right? You got to practice self-examination. You got to control the controllables, keep perspective, stay calm, stay balanced, right? But be in control of the situation with difficult people by asking questions. Listen, there's a quote I didn't write down, but it says the person asking the questions has control. The person asking the questions has control. When you're dealing with difficult people, understand that you can keep calm and you can keep balance if you begin asking those important questions in the situation. You know what were you thinking when you did that? What's your process? Help me understand your thought process. How does this, what decision you made align with the vision, with the mission, with the purpose, right? And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, is to regain control by asking questions. Think about a courtroom. Think about a courtroom. The lawyer is supposed to ask questions. When that judge start asking questions, you know clearly who's in. The person in control when you're dealing with difficult people is the person that's asking the questions. Here's another thing that you can remember when you're dealing with difficult people, and I'm putting it in high gear now, is I read this, just get rid of them. But how do you get rid of difficult people? You quite possibly may not be able to get rid of them from the sense of just excluding them. But the more you grow, the more their level of difficulty diminishes. So they can stay in your life, but as you work on you, they go from being difficult to being common. Why? Because the things that they do that used to bother you, as you work on yourself, no longer bother you. My brother Doc, I shouted him out. Don't ask questions if you aren't ready, man, boy. Don't ask questions if you aren't ready for the answers. Whew. That's a whole 20 minutes. I ain't even gonna play with that, boy. Appreciate you, bro. Listen, take control. There are some people, and I remember the first thing I said, there are difficult people in our lives because we put them there. Those people you can release out of your life a lot of times. But as you work on yourself, you can eliminate difficult people because their level of difficulty can diminish when you work on how you deal with them, when you work on your responsibility, your ability to respond to them. Okay. All right. So we're talking about difficult people here on the Practical Purpose Podcast. We always try to give a biblical perspective to whatever the topic is. And I know I'm running over time. I know that the screen may still be blurry, but as long as you're listening, we good. Paul addresses dealing with difficult people. It's a good bit of text. I'm gonna read it fast, but Paul addresses dealing with difficult people in Romans 12:16-21. He says, "Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion." Lord. Verse 17, repay no one evil for evil. He's talking about dealing with difficult people. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will reap coals on and a fire on his head. Not become overcome with evil, overcome evil with good. Here, there's so much in there that I'm not tackling. But there are three things that I want to bring out that he mentions about dealing with difficult people in the last few minutes. He says, do not repay evil for evil. Verse 17, repay no one evil for evil. Here it is. Point number one, when you're dealing with difficult people from a biblical perspective, watch this, you got to stop being petty. You got to stop being petty. Some of us love to be petty because it's a fleshly gratification that comes when you are petty. He says, don't return evil for evil. Some of us boast in our pettiness, right? Remember, we're flipping from just the practicality of it to the spiritual side of it, right? And biblically speaking, you got to stop being petty. All right, we're going to struggle with that. Many of us are going to struggle with being petty. My brother. Listen, because we all do it. We all do it at times. We may not all do it at work, but if you got a spouse, if you got a significant other, you petty sometimes. You do it with your children. You do it with your children. When Walk says guilty as charged of occasional pettiness, right? right. We can be very petty at times. Paul says, don't return evil for evil. Listen, the way to get good from your brother is to do good even when they don't. That's by Dr. Freckham. He says the way to get good from your brother is to do good even when they don't. Listen, because here it is. Whew, Lord, here it is. That's not immediate gratification for us, so we don't like it. See, when somebody do us wrong, we want to see them be done wrong immediately. When somebody does us wrong, we want to see the ramifications of that. But spiritually speaking, biblically speaking, you may never see the ramifications of what they did. You may never see God avenge you. You may never see it. He said he would, and you got to trust that he will. Listen, when you have true power, you don't need to be petty. When you have true power, you don't need to be petty. Listen, pettiness is a fleshly response. Remember, responsibility. It's a fleshly response to evil being done to us. It's a fleshly response to things being done to us that we don't like. Because sometimes things are done to us that we don't like, and it's not wrong. Pettiness is a fleshly response to that. So Paul says, don't return evil for evil. Don't be petty. Don't be petty. Here's the second thing Paul says, or second point that I want to highlight. It's so many of them. Second point I want to highlight that Paul says, he says this. He says, as much as depends on you. He says, if it is possible, as much as depends on you. You got to do your part. Right? Remember, that's the whole premise of dealing with difficult people. The whole premise that I'm trying to present to you is that you are doing your part in dealing with others by dealing with you. Let me say that again. You are doing your part in dealing with others by working on yourself. Listen, he says, if possible, as much as depends on you. What does that say to us? That says to us that sometimes it's not possible. So sometimes you've done all the work you can do on yourself, and you genuinely have done it, but the other person is not willing to do any work. Right? He says, if possible, as much as depends on you. Listen, you can't complain about others if you're unwilling to work on yourself. You can't complain about other people being difficult if you're unwilling to acknowledge how difficult you are and work on it. Right? We live in a culture. We got social media, we got Facebook, we got TikTok, we got YouTube, we Twitter, Instagram, we LinkedIn, we got everything. Now, we are in a culture in which we are pointing the fingers at so many other people all the time and unwilling to look at ourselves. We're unwilling to look at ourselves. You cannot complain about the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do. You cannot complain about the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do. And for a lot of people, in my case especially, I'm talking to myself, there are relationships that have been severed, or relationships that I criticized the other person for being so difficult, but I didn't take the time and do the extensive work on myself to rectify the situation. And I could have, had I started to look in the mirror and not just glance. Right? And so many times in retrospect, what they say, hindsight is 20/20, right? Right? Life is lived forward but understood backwards. And so in hindsight, I think about some relationships, right? Maybe it was work relationships, maybe there were friendships that were severed or that were ended in a negative way, and it wasn't necessarily the other person's fault. Or it was the other person's fault, but I still didn't do all the work that I could do. How willing are you to do the work on yourself? You've got to do your part. Paul says, if possible, as much as depends on you. You're responsible for you. Goes back to controlling the controllables. You can't control everybody. Can't control every situation. You've got to control you. You've got to control you. Listen, last point I want to make about what Paul says here in the text. He says, leave room. He says, beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place or leave room for God's wrath. Third point is this: you let God get them. See, and we don't like that. We don't like that. We don't like that for a few reasons. One, I heard my counselor say this: we're in a microwave society. Listen, we want it to happen right now. Right? Oh, she rolled her eyes at me, and we want her to get it right then. We want her to get the revenge. We want God to get them right then, and we want to see it happen. Let me explain something. Oftentimes, I would venture to say most of the times, you're not going to see the revenge. You've got to trust that he did what he said he was going to do. Right? You've got to trust that he did what he said he was going to do. God is so much better at revenge than we are. God is so much better at revenge than we are. He calls it reaping and sowing. Reaping and sowing. Listen, I said this to someone today. I said, you don't reap what you sow. You reap more than what you sow later than you sow. Let me say that again. You don't just reap what you sow, you reap more than you sow later than you sow. What does that mean? That's that, and I can't take credit for that. That's something that was taught by the late great Dr. Charles Stanley. You reap more than you sow. When you plant an apple seed, you don't get an apple. You get an apple tree full of apples. So whatever you sow, you're gonna reap that in abundance. The church folk always look at that in the money standpoint, but it's the same way in everything. You reap you sow negativity, you're gonna reap negativity, and you're gonna reap it a lot worse than you sowed it. Right? So you got to understand, when difficult people are being difficult because they're genuinely evil, it's gonna come back and get them, and it's gonna get them a lot worse than what they did. It's going to get them in different aspects of their life. Have you ever seen someone who just treated people bad in leadership positions, and then they retire, and you see like the health just started to fail and things just started negatively to happen? You're not happy to see those things happening, but it's the principle of reaping what you sow. It doesn't come back the same way all the time. Just because you treat someone bad don't mean somebody's going to treat you bad. No, God has a way of making us feel the ramifications of what we've sowed in someone else. God is so much better at revenge than we are. Some religions call that karma. We call it, in Christianity, we call it reaping what you sow. We want to see the payback. Right? That's the problem. We want to see the payback. I read this quote: when you seek revenge, dig 2 graves, one for your enemy and one for you. When you seek revenge, 2 graves, one for your enemy and one for you. Remember, we're looking at this from the practical sense, but we're also looking at this from a biblical perspective. When you look at it from a biblical perspective, God is so much better at this than we are. We're terrible. We're terrible judges. Right? Because we often judge people based off of the limited information that we have. In comparison to God, we're terrible judges. We're terrible avengers. Right? Sometimes God allows us to be mishandled to expose the heart of other people. Sometimes God allows us to be mishandled to expose the hearts and intentions of other people. I couldn't read my own writing. To expose the hearts and the intentions of other people. So oftentimes you being mishandled and treated a certain way is God trying to show you need to distance yourself from this person. But you remember a few podcasts ago, I talked about that David said the Lord is our shepherd, and that sheep are often categorized as being very dumb creatures. See, oftentimes God sends things to show it to us about people, but sometimes we're not smart enough to catch on to the fact that, why am I allowing this person to continue to be difficult in my life when in some cases you have to deal with them. Now, in other cases, you got to deal with certain people. Your boss, you're gonna have to deal with. You're gonna have to figure out how to work on yourself. You're gonna have to figure out how to keep perspective. You're gonna have to figure out how to stay calm. You have to figure out how to ask the right questions. And like Doc said, be ready for the answers. Right? But Paul illustrates to us something in the text. He says you got to stop being petty. As much as that human fleshly gratification wants to be petty, you got to stop doing it. He says you got to do your part as much as depends on you. And it says you got to leave room for God's wrath. Leaving room for God's wrath means you got to release it out of your hands so that he can deal with it. You know, there's a such thing in law called double jeopardy, meaning you can't be punished for something more than once. So either you're going to get it back on them and get your revenge, or you're going to allow God to do it. That's why he says you got to leave room for him. Let him do it. Listen, he says one other thing that's not in my notes, but I got highlighted in verse 21. He says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Listen, getting back at people is not going to solve any problem. Getting back at people is not going to help you get where you're trying to go. You've got to leave room so that God can get back at them. Right? You've got to leave room. Stop being petty, y'all. Stop being petty. Do your part. Leave room for God. Listen, here's your closure. Here's your homework. Here's your homework. Identify one difficult person in your life. Now, that person could be you, but I want this to be someone else. Because some of us difficult. I want you to identify one difficult person in your life. And just for this 1 week, for 1 week, I want you to focus on how you're going to deal with them. Remember, you got to keep perspective on human nature. Understand they got a story, they got baggage, they got trauma. You might need to ask some questions, right? But I want you to identify that one person. I don't want you to identify two. I don't want you to identify three, because dealing with difficult people is overwhelming when there's so many of them. And oftentimes the formula that may work with one may not necessarily work with another. So what I want you to do is I want you to identify one difficult person in your life. My brother said, look, I read that wrong. He said I have at least 10 people to share this with. Bruh, I thought he said I got at least 10 people in my house to deal with. Oh, listen, identify one. And I want you to just walk these principles out that we talked about. Now, I do understand that you could go so deep with dealing with this. Matter of fact, in the book of Romans 12, Paul is really dealing with how we deal with each other. He's really talking about how we deal with one another. He's doing it in depth, right? Because if it's hard to have a vertical relationship right when the horizontal relationships are wrong. And there's so many people, church people, who they jump over the pews, they shout, they speak in tongues, they do all of those different things on Sunday, and their horizontal relationships are horrible. And they think that they think they're good, they think right. But you've got to be in a place in your life where you're willing to deal with the people in your life horizontally. Those relationships are important. I promise you this. Listen, I don't want to get too deep. I want to get too spiritual. But when you get to heaven, if you get there, I hope you get there. When you get there, He's gonna ask you about these horizontal relationships. He's gonna ask you about how you treated that coworker. He's gonna ask you why you didn't examine yourself. He's gonna ask you about how you treated your wife. He's going to ask you about how you treated your husband, how you treated your children. Those horizontal relationships are so important. But oftentimes in Christian circles, we only focus on that vertical. Right? And that's why you got people who will cuss you out on Tuesday and speak in tongues on Sunday. Because those horizontal relationships are horrible. Listen, I want you to identify one difficult person in your life. Focus on how you're going to deal with them this week. This week, just 1 week. Rewind this, play it back. I apologize about the blurriness of the screen. It's a storm. It's a storm going on. But long as you can still hear, you can still tap into what we're talking about today. It's a Practical Purpose podcast. Let me go back. I do want to go back for my brothers that might not have been on to catch it, and I want to highlight again my brothers who are doing some great things in public education. These guys are guys right here in South Carolina where I am that are doing amazing things as principals, as leaders. And I do think it's very important that we always take time to acknowledge greatness when we've come in contact with them. And these are guys that have mentored me, or I have mentored, and we have good relationships together. And I just wanted to highlight them tonight. Listen, this is the Practical Purpose podcast. I appreciate you being here. We're in a series called Dealing with Difficulty. The next time we're on, we're going to be talking about dealing with difficult circumstances. All right, tonight we talked about dealing with difficult people. I want you to like, share, subscribe, send this out to people, as many people as you know that need to hear a message about how to deal with, in a practical sense, how to deal with difficult people. Listen, this is Dr. Williams signing out. May y'all be blessed.